Hello folks, my name is Tim Utz. I'm the host of CCCR-Education. It's tough to get out every time I try. But today we have with us Dan McGrath. Hello Dan, nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me on.
Dan McGrath here is involved in Minnesota Majority, and I'm going to ask him a few questions today. We're going to be talking about voter ID and the importance and integrity, holding the integrity of the voting process in place. So Dan, nice to have you here today. Real quickly, let's start out, who are you and a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm the executive director of Minnesota Majority, which is a nonprofit, traditional values, government watchdog group. We do grassroots organizing, and we help educate our members on what their legislators are up to, and then provide them simple tools so they can get involved and weigh in on the process with just less than 5 minutes a week of their time. We have members all around the state. We're one of the largest organizations that are conservative nonprofit in the state, and so when our people are informed and take action, it's heard loudly at the Capitol.
So how many people do you have in this organization?
Well, our exact membership total is confidential, but it's in the tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. And when did you start, when did Minnesota Majority start then?
It was founded by Jeff Davis in 2007. I came aboard in 2008 and have been helping them there ever since.
And we've got tens of thousands of members in 3 years, so obviously you're doing something, getting somebody's attention.
Jeff is really good at growing the organization and getting people motivated.
Then also a question for you, a little bit about your personal life. You're married, you live up in north in Boundary Waters, a little bit about who you are so people get to know who Jeff is.
I am married to my beautiful wife Jessica now for 13 years. We live in South Minneapolis, right by the old Ventura light rail line.
Okay.
So that's always a treat driving down Hiawatha in the morning with those messed up signals.
Apparently you're not hip on the light rail too well.
I'm not a big fan. No,
okay.
I really don't like the ongoing subsidy that's involved with it either.
Okay. Have you been in Minnesota all your life, or are you from another state?
Yeah, I was born downtown Minneapolis and lived here my entire life.
So you haven't gone very far from your birthplace then, huh?
No,
10 blocks.
A couple forays into the suburbs briefly, and always go back to my home city.
Okay. Well, could you talk a little bit about the behind-the-scenes process of elections in Minnesota? People go November 1st, 5th, or whatever day it is. We all run in there, we sign our name, go grab a ballot and go in a back room and try and figure out who we're going to vote for. But there's a lot of things happen prior to that, months in advance for training and educating the people who are working behind the scenes, the people we meet when we walk inside and say, okay, my name is Tim as an example and I want to vote. So could you just go over that process a little bit and let us people know how this all works?
Well, sure. I guess I'll start with the transaction of the voter and what happens behind the scenes from when that process starts. The first step is you submit an application to register to vote. And for many of us...
And we can do that online? We can get a hold of the state, call Minnesota Majority, or...
Oh yeah, candidates do drives, sometimes door to door, having people sign up. Once you fill out that application, there's a number of things that happen. It gets submitted to the Secretary of State's office, and they run a series of verification checks that people don't realize is happening, or well, they're supposed to run this series of verification checks. They're supposed to check your name against a list, for example, of people that have been convicted of felonies and have lost their right to vote. People that might be under guardianships and have therefore lost the right to vote. People that are known to be non-citizens. So you're supposed to be checked against all those things before you're entered into the voter registration system. And then once they've validated that much, they mail out a postcard to tell you that you're now registered to vote. And it gives you your precinct voting location on it. Now that's non-forwardable official election mail. So if the voter it's mailed to is not living at that address, or that address doesn't exist, there's some other reason that it's not deliverable, it bounces back to the county auditors, and then they say, aha, there's something wrong with this registration. This guy says he lives at 123 Main Street, but 123 Main Street isn't there, or...
It's a parking lot or whatever. Yeah.
Or Joe Voter doesn't live there. Okay. So then what they do is they flag that voter on the rolls for challenge. So if he shows up at the polling place, he's going to have to provide some additional documentation of his residency at the address that he provided.
So I got a quick question. So the state sends out this form, but this form doesn't go back to the state. It goes to the county then, if it's bounced back?
Yep, it goes back to the county auditors, and then the county auditors would enter into the statewide voter registration system that you are now a challenged status voter. And that goes to the state.
Okay.
central database, and then when the state produces the rosters, that's the next step along your voter registration, is you get put onto those books that we're all
That I see when I have to sign it.
Now we're back into the realm of the visible again.
That comes from the state, though, those documents.
The state produces the rosters and then ships them off back to the counties.
Okay.
And then the counties disseminate them out to all their various municipalities and then on to the precincts. So it's a pretty massive distribution system that goes on.
That sounds
with
like
these
a lot.
paper books.
Yes, a lot of paperwork,
It's
a lot of.
staggering to think about the number of pages that are printed just for these roster books and sent all over the state. And there's millions and millions of these pages. And with the postal verification card that I mentioned, also millions of those go out every year. If you stacked them all on top of each other from a typical election, it would be taller than a 30-story office building. Just the postal verification
Just the postal verification.
It's a lot of paper.
Wow. So the taxpayers, to maintain the integrity of the voting process, are paying this out of our tax base.
It's an expensive, complicated process.
Any idea offhand what we spend in an average year in this process? Or
well, I'm not certain. I have some figures on what we're paying for rosters and postal verification cards, and just between those things, it's in the neighborhood of $2 million a year.
Okay. Okay. Well, it doesn't sound like a lot for a budget of, what, $20 to $30 billion.
That's just for paper.
Right.
We're paying election judges.
Everybody
There's
else.
over 4,000 precincts in the state.
Okay.
And each one of those precincts has a head election judge and then several other auxiliary election judges. There's usually 2 or 3 at the sign-in table where you've got your roster books and you have to line up by part of the last name, you know, A through M and then N through Z, or however they've got it set up at the polling place depending on how big it is. So you've got an election judge sitting in front of each of those books, and then you've got an election day registration judge, and usually 1 or 2 other ones walking around, you know, keeping an eye on the ballot box, and then you've got the judges that hand you the ballots. All those judges are paid. So
Oh, they are?
Yes.
So 4,000 times 5 or 6 or what, you're looking at 20, 15, 20,000 people possibly.
Tremendous amount of manpower, and behind that there's all the election workers at the municipal level, at the county level, and at the state level.
So this isn't a small, this is not a small event. Okay.
Process.
Okay. Now this is just my observation. I walk in and I'm voting, and I notice everybody in there is 85 or older. It feels like. Now that's not necessarily true. So how do we get involved? Because obviously these people have commitments that are an interest in the political process and the voting process that a lot of us young people don't. So we need to get involved and participate more. But that's been my observation. So I'm just curious. Can you get involved in this, or is it exclusive to people who are retired or whatever?
Oh, no, absolutely not. In fact, there's a dire shortage of election judges in a lot of communities. They attempt to have party balance. So you've got Republicans evenly matched with Democrats. It's supposed to be the same number of each major political party in the polling place. But that usually doesn't happen. So you have this phenomenon, especially in the cities, that they call Republican for a day, which is where a Democrat says, today I'm going to be a Republican,
okay,
and then I'm going to serve that bipartisan role as the Republican election judge. So it kind of puts the Republicans at a disadvantage in the urban core because there's not enough people signing up.
Let's say whether I'm a Democrat,
judge.
Republican, Independent, or whatever, and I decide I want to get involved as election judge or whatever. When would I start the process prior to the November election day? Would it be in July or October, or is there some kind of is there somebody I have a contact? Would I contact the Secretary of State's office or the party? What would the person do?
Usually the summer is a good time in an election year to start getting involved in that process. There's training that's involved with election judges that you have to go through several hours of training on how to conduct yourself at the polling place and what the election laws are. There are, well, the Minnesota election law covers Minnesota Chapter 200 through 200 and I want to say 214, and each of those chapters has dozens of subdivisions, so there are hundreds and hundreds of statutes that election judges need to learn in order to effectively do their job.
Okay.
So there's a training process involved. Best to get involved earlier. You can sign up through a political party. You can go straight to your local election office, or you can go to the Secretary of State and say you want to volunteer.
No, there's hundreds of rules. That's the election judge, not necessarily people who are the other people. That's just a senior person in that organization, that precinct, then, or is it everybody in that precinct needs to know and understand all these rules?
Ideally, the head election judge at a minimum should be on the surface familiar with all of those statutes.
Okay. All right.
They do put a manual together that has kind of the high-level points that election judges are most likely going to encounter in the polling place.
All right.